Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out in the half marathon close down up there. It's good to see you this morning. I'm Sally Allison, and I am the chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. And I would like to introduce to you today Gwen Olton. She will be our speaker this morning, and she is a lifelong student of nonviolence and brings a unique background in geological and health sciences, philosophy, and creative practices to her work. She is passionate about communication models and group processes that call forth our whole selves and leverage for systemic and liberatory change. She is an appreciative inquiry facilitator, member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, restorative process facilitator, transformative mediator, and an apprentice provider with the Nonviolent Global Liberation Community. Gwen studied philosophy and geology at the University of Rochester, nursing at St. John Fisher University, and holds a master's in peace and conflict resolution from Arcadia University. She's published a book on conflict transformation and currently serves as the co-director for the M.K. Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence here in Rochester. With no further ado, here is Gwen. Thank you.
Thanks, friends. It's lovely to see y'all this morning. And hold on, I'm going to put my water bottle down. Just feel very conscious of when I'm away from the mic. I'm supposed to be able to hear me. So thanks for taking a little time this morning to spend with one another and with me. And thank you to friends on Zoom who are joining, if there's anyone there. No, we don't know. Who knows? Not right now. Okay, we won't thank our friends on Zoom yet. So I'm Gwen Olton, and as Sally said, I work at the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence, and I also have my colleague Bianca Pointner over here, who is just hanging out. She wanted to come, and spend some time with y'all too. So our purpose today in this session, which you probably know if you looked at the flyer, is to kind of focus on belonging. So we're going to talk a little bit today about belonging and exclusion. And we'll do that through just reflecting on our own a little bit, and then spending some time discussing and reflecting together. So, an hour is short. I kind of think about this as just like a toe dip into some of these topics. But I think we can still, really find some meaningful conversation in a short period of time. So, I know you've likely got a service like right after, so I'm going to make sure I end on time, even though we're starting a little bit late. Just want to name that. Sometimes I'm doing workshops with like teachers or people who are going on to do another job right after the workshop. So I feel like I always need to name that I will be ending on time. Okay. So the first thing that I would love for us to do is actually answer a different set of questions that I'll put up in a moment. And I was going to say, if we had more people, if there's a way for you to find someone that you haven't talked with much. I don't know if you all know each other super well, but if there are people in the room that you don't talk to as often, it would be good for you to connect with them. So find at least one other person. I haven't counted, and I'm terrible at counting while I talk, so maybe there will be a triad, but find someone else in the room, at least a pair, and maybe a group of 3. And check in with each other. How are you feeling this morning? Let's go beyond just like good or bad or fine. So how are you showing up? Are you hungry, well rested? How has your weekend been? Do a little check-in about how you're feeling and how you're showing up in this moment. And then I'd love for you to reflect a little bit in what spaces or groups have you felt a sense of belonging? So what are some of the groups or spaces or organizations or times in your life have you felt a strong sense of belonging, like you were really included and welcomed? And then the last question, I know there's 3. This is a lot, but it's going to be up here too, if you need to look. Do you know what helped you feel like you belonged? What were some of the things that helped you feel that sense of belonging? Maybe people did things or said things, or you had practices together that helped build that belonging. But what were some of those elements? Okay, let me flip this paper. Okay, so how are you feeling? When have you felt a sense of belonging, and what helps you feel that way? And here's some more questions to help you get at that. So go ahead and find at least one other buddy. Try to find someone you haven't talked with very much before. You can get up and stand and move around. You're going to be talking for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together and I'll collect some ideas. Yeah, so I'm really curious to hear from at least some of the groups about what you came up with and how your conversation was, especially around this last question, around what are some of the elements or practices or strategies that help us feel belonging? Are there things, yeah, in your, and I'm sorry, I'm really starting audience stuff maybe before folks were expecting, but yeah, what are some of the practices or elements that help you feel like you belong? Anyone willing to go first?
Ronnie is raising her hand.
I'll be brave.
Thank
She's
you.
brave.
I think when you come to a church, for example,
Mhm.
and people notice that you're new and they welcome you, and you don't just stand alone, sort of wondering, like what's going on in this church. So that was one thing.
Yeah, like being noticed and welcomed and invited, having people kind of acknowledge your presence in a space, especially if you're new. Yeah. Thank you. Others?
Just participating and contributing to the
Mhm.
organization, I think helps anybody feel like they belong. If you demonstrate your commitment by participating on necessary committees or things like that.
Yeah. So seeing, like, if you're joining a new group, if you start participating or just finding a way to contribute back to the group, that's one way to start to feel included or a sense of belonging. Yeah. Great. Sally.
It's very helpful that if people make eye contact with you, and also if maybe you kind of know people a little bit, you're not completely new, that people remember your name, or that when you give them your name, they pronounce it correctly and they're willing, to make a little effort if it's maybe slightly different, or they say it over again. So that they're kind of trying to remember what your name is. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah. So this just like making eye contact again, like acknowledging, yeah, the person in front of you. And also it's like even just the effort of trying to say someone's name correctly and maybe working a little bit if it's a name that maybe is not from your culture or something, right? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. What else?
I was saying that I don't often think of the word belonging in those situations. I think about whether I'm comfortable or not, or whether I know somebody or not. But in my mind, I don't put it in that framework. And yet I have a very dear friend who does have that feeling. So it's interesting. I think it probably starts with our early experiences, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So just, maybe even thinking like the word belonging might not resonate too. And sometimes for me, I can think about places where I felt a sense of belonging by first thinking about where have I not felt like I belonged? Where have I felt excluded? And then I can think about, okay, so that's what exclusion felt like. So what are some of the places I felt a belonging? And some of us have been really, I think the word privileged can like have a lot of loaded meaning. And I don't have another word to use at the moment, but to think about if I have gone through a lot of my life and in each group I'm in, I actually don't feel excluded. That's like, whew, what a gift, right? Yeah. So for some of us, it's just we haven't had the experience of really being excluded very much. And so the belonging maybe doesn't pop up. Right.
It doesn't feel like an issue usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and I thought, it is because of a lot of it's because of privileges.
Yeah. I have a mentor of
Just
mine who
being-
says, there are privileges I want everyone to have, and there are privileges I want no one to have. So I'm just going to focus on a privilege that I would like everyone to have is to feel a sense of belonging, like in any space, or a sense of, because I know sometimes if I create a group that's just for women, for instance, right? It's not that I think that exclusion isn't something that makes sense in that space. Like maybe I don't want men in that space specifically so that women or friends who are non-binary can come and participate without men there, right? And at the same time, if a man comes, I want them to feel a sense of us seeing their full humanity and appreciating them as people, even if we're saying, let's find another space to be together. That's not the space, right? So lots of dance around like what this can be. Yeah. One more. I see you have the mic.
Oh, well, he gave it to me. I had a sense of belonging that he wanted to sit next to me and learn about me,
Oh,
tell me about himself, because he seems like a very important person around here. He's
sometimes when we see our groups where we want to join, like I would like to join this group and belong in this fair, right? Yeah, but I love what you're saying. Part of what I'm hearing you say is like just someone having an interest and curiosity in you, right? Like just a sense of like, oh, I'm choosing you and I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, it feels so special. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Having a feeling of commonality with people, shared values or shared experiences, or having shared backgrounds or similar backgrounds helps you feel more comfortable with at least the other person. And well, I'm in a support group and we have similar experiences, and so that's very good. Very comfortable. You can talk about some things and you know that other people will understand, whereas other people may not understand at all.
Yeah, thank you. Thinking about this idea of like, when we have some shared experiences or shared background, it can automatically start to kind of like draw a circle around us to think about, oh, like we've all got this shared experience. Yeah. Yeah. It can, help you define what a group is by saying like what your shared background is or what your shared experience is. And some of that has to do with saying what the purpose of a group is, right? If I said the purpose of this group is to discuss the new Mortal Kombat game that just came out, some of you just might not have a sense of belonging, right? Like I actually wouldn't feel like I belong to that group. I only happen to know that a new game came out because of my nephew telling me, right? But so saying what the purpose of a group is starts to kind of draw the map around who belongs and who maybe wants to find another group. Yeah, so that can be a way that we start to understand who we are as a team or a group. And sometimes when we're in groups where we want to have kind of maximal inclusion, it becomes tricky because we want to make sure that people don't feel excluded based on like a background or an identity, right? And then we start to think about like, oh, how can we frame, our purpose and naming of what our group is so that we have sort of maximal inclusion, right? Yeah. So is there another, you're sitting, okay. What I was thinking about doing, is talking a little bit about exclusion and how we kind of decide who is an us and who is a them, and just a little bit, right? And I was sort of telling some folks who were here a bit earlier, I'm just going to repeat that, our time today is like so short. This is an important but short like toe dip into this conversation, right? It's such a rich kind of pool that we could be wading in. I'm really mixing metaphors. I don't know what a rich pool would be. Let's move away from that one. So, but I just want to say we're kind of like just dipping a toe into the water of this topic, right? I want to invite us to think about, I've been saying inclusion and belonging versus exclusion. Another way to talk about this is with this phrase to other someone or othering. So maybe like you could just put your hand up a little bit if you're familiar with that phrase. It doesn't mean you have to define it. I'm not going to ask you to unless you want to. Okay. So and does someone want to say what their understanding of othering is? It's okay if no. Okay. So I think there's multiple definitions. I'm going to invite us to think about one understanding of it that is just a way of defining who is part of me or who is part of an us and who is part of a them. So you could think about it as an us them thing. And when I other someone, it usually means, or I usually take it to mean, like in the conflict work and nonviolence work that I do, that I'm starting to not see someone's humanity. I'm starting to see them as just one part of their identity, maybe, or just one part of like an action or a strategy that they've taken. I'm turning them into an other. So I think about it as this sort of process that my brain might go through to put someone into a box that kind of narrowly defines them as not part of me, not part of my in-group, not part of my circle, right? And one of the things that's kind of like fascinating to me about who gets to be an us and who gets to be a them, is that my brain sorts people into an us or a them really quickly. Like I'm not deciding to do it, right? So I might, look at someone and see some differences and my brain just sorts someone away from being an us, being part of my in-group or my group. And does anyone know like how fast our brains do this sorting? Sally, 3 seconds. We got to vote for 3 seconds. Other ideas? 0.1 second. Gonna start a bidding war. What else? Do we have other ideas? Okay. It's in 1/20th of a second. It's like really fast, right? We just boom, 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 sort people into us or them. And then I think about othering as not actually the sorting, right? Because I don't have any conscious control on what my brain is doing in 1/20th of a second. That's not, my decision making doing that. That's maybe part of my amygdala, some other parts of my brain are just moving people, us, them, really fast. But when I reinforce my brain sorting through thinking and narratives and storytelling about who people are, to me, that is othering. And that becomes a practice of exclusion that I do between my ears. So, for example, let's say I'm going to use, I want to use like an inanimate object as an example, because I really don't want to reinforce exclusionary stories about people in this moment. And I just want us to focus on maybe like a silly example so we can think about it. Let's say I had a bad experience with a blue water bottle, one blue water bottle, someone hit me with it. And now every time I see a blue water bottle, my brain just in 1/20th of a second is like blue water bottles, bad. Right. But then like every other color of a water bottle gets put into my us circle. Like it's fine. Every other color of a water bottle, no problem. Blue water bottle, bad. So that's that sorting that happens. When I reinforce the sorting with my narratives about it, right? Like my thinking, I think like, yeah, stupid blue water bottle. So those are the worst color. Everybody knows blue water bottles are bad. So anytime I start thinking about it on top of it, and I'm not interrupting that sorting, that's when we start to like other. This is tricky because that our thinking happens fast too, right? And I wouldn't say we have like full control over our thoughts, but they're practices. I try to remind myself, I'm practicing things in every moment. right? I'm practicing talking in front of a group right now, right? When I'm just by myself, if I'm reading a book, I'm practicing how much attention I'm bringing to the book. So just asking myself, what do I want to practice in this moment? What do I want to get better at in this moment? And what do I want to start to leave behind? And if one of the things we've been practicing for, I'm 41, let's say for 20 years, I've been thinking like bad thoughts about blue water bottles. I'm just getting really, really good at othering blue water bottles, right? And if I don't start interrupting that practice, I'll be an expert at othering blue water bottles by the time I'm 60, right? That's a lot of years of practice. So I know it's like a silly example, but I just want us to think about how our thought patterns actually even contribute to this kind of sense of othering. So then it can happen that by the time I walk into a room with a blue water bottle, I go, right? And I'm not coming to it with curiosity. I'm not coming to it with a sense of shared commonality. I'm not making any kind of, and now the metaphor really falls apart, but if you think about how we do this with humans, right? And all the things you named that help build a sense of belonging, making eye contact, showing curiosity, finding commonality, participating and contributing, noticing and welcoming. I won't be doing any of that to someone that I have practiced othering in some ways. Okay, that was a lot of me talking. I apologize. I want us to talk together a little bit more and think about and reflect a little bit on exclusion. So we spent some time reflecting on belonging. I want us to stretch and think about exclusion a little bit. And I actually want to give you a moment to sit quietly. So I'm going to set a timer for just 2 minutes so that you can think to yourself about the answers to these questions. And then I'll ask you to talk with your partner. I'll let you know when the 2 minutes is up. I'll also flip the paper so you can see it again, but I want to say the questions first. When have you experienced exclusion? When have you in your life been excluded for something? And it's okay if you don't want to talk about them with your partner, but hold the question and see if you can remember a time where you felt excluded. And then this one sometimes is a stretch for us. When have you excluded others? When have you kind of othered someone and excluded them? How do you know when you're excluding someone? I call this like the signs and the symptoms. Like for me, a sign that I'm starting to exclude someone might be like, I find myself kind of judging, everything they're doing. They say something and I'm like, I wouldn't have said it like that. I wouldn't have done it like that. I start to have judgments happen and I'm noticing the judgments. So what are your signs and symptoms that you're excluding someone? And then finally, what are the practices or strategies that can bring someone back into community when they've been excluded? How can we welcome someone back if they've been experiencing exclusion? Okay, I'm going to flip this so that you can see it, and I'm going to be silent for 2 minutes. I'll let you know when the 2 minutes is up, and then I'll invite you to share with a partner or in a triad. Okay. Questions about what we're doing before we do that, though? Okay. Okay, starting the 2 minute timer now. We'll just quietly reflect for a couple minutes. Okay, that's the 2 minutes. Going to invite you to start conversation and share whatever you're up for sharing. I know these can be kind of like harsh, maybe feeling questions. So share what feels all right for you to share. We're going to do this for about 10 minutes again. I'll let you know when we're about halfway through. Yeah, I want to hear everything, and that's not what we have time for. So just holding that curiosity is there. I'm especially curious to hear from a few folks if you talked about or even reflected on what are some of your own signs and symptoms that you're starting to other someone. I think this is important because it's very easy for me to see when other people are being judgmental and exclusionary and othering. And I want to continue to look at myself and when I am doing this too, because the more I look at it, the earlier I can catch it. You know, I can stop like telling myself those stories that start to put someone into an out group, that start to exclude people. And, you know, the more kind of social capital we have, the more we are charismatic, the more power we have, the more people we know, the more it matters if we other someone or exclude them, right? So I'm the leader of an organization. In general, people tend to listen to me when I'm talking. So I have this sort of social capital. If I start to like have judgments and express judgments and exclusion of people, that can have a real impact on how other people are thinking about it. I mean, hopefully they think, what is Gwen talking about? She's super judgy. Let's stop listening to her, right? But it might take a while before that happens. And in the meantime, I might convince others, right? So it really does, you know, it matters for lots of reasons, but that's one of the things I was just thinking of. So wondering if anyone talked about this or thought about this, what are some of your signs and symptoms that you are starting to other someone? And then if folks talked about this other question. Yeah. Go to you next, Sally.
Whenever I use the word they are, they do, or they this or they that is definitely othering people. It's a simple concept, but we hear it all the time.
Yeah. So when you find yourself using particular types of language, especially saying like groups of people as like a them,
Is that you?
right?
You understand?
And not for just ease of conversation. Right.
I think when I start to label people and just see them only as the label that I've put on them, which is really easy these days politically to slap a label on somebody and say, you have no humanity other than you are a breathing human being, but I've labeled you as X. And so you're whatever else you say is wrong, or you have no humanity.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because we can be so divided and hold on to our beliefs so hard that we can't even see that the other person is still a human being and, you know, may have other reasons for what they do. And we may connect with them on some other level, but we might never do that because we've just labeled them and written them off.
Yeah. Yeah. Our brains also love simplicity, right? And it's hard to hold the complexity of knowing that someone holds XYZ views and also they do all these other things and are this other full human. It's like we just want to go like, well, but they hold XYZ views. So therefore we'll label them this and then that's it. And it's not to minimize what XYZ views might mean in the world, right? Yeah. Thank you.
I was saying that in our family and with some friends, we just have an understanding that we don't talk politics, which does keep us from othering them. And yet the fact is that we never talk about our differences.
Oh, yeah. I feel this. I've had this experience in my family too, where we know there's big divergences. I have a big family with a lot of siblings and we know there's big divergences. And so one of the ways that we've kept the peace in the past has been by not talking about it, because then when we talk about it, we fight. And it's like, if we don't talk about it, then we don't work some of these things out. And if we can't work some of these things out, right? Yeah. And also it's like talking about the hard stuff takes practice.
Yeah.
So now I kind of think about my family as like a little learning lab. I'm like, because there's a lot of resilience there, you know, like, so I have a brother, I grew up in Wayne County and I have a brother who is super conservative and I'm less conservative. We have very different kind of like political views. And he has a lot of resilience to talk with me about stuff that we disagree. And I have a lot of resilience to talk about stuff with him too, because I really enjoy him and think he's very funny. And when I kind of hold that and I'm like, okay, I want to practice talking about whatever this topic is with my brother and like see how it goes. Sometimes I'll tell him like, I want to practice talking about this with someone who holds very different political views than me. And sometimes we get into it, you know, through a different kind of doorway. But yeah, so I've just been thinking about this, like my family is a learning lab kind of place when we have divergences. So yeah, thank you.
Greg, did you have your hand up? No.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I mean, thank you for bringing up the issues of belonging and exclusion. And I would love to think that we are able to be belongers and not excluders,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's possible. I think that the world is too complex. There's only so much energy. We only have the ability to focus on a few things at a time. And as I get older, that number of things I can focus on gets smaller. But I think that, again, taking a broader principle is, you know, how do we do a both and here? It's not that you're going to be either a belonger or an excluder. I'm generally curious, but that doesn't mean that I can be curious about everything at all times. And other people just are not going to be as curious. I think that it's just, I think, useful for me to remind myself that other people are having to do their own struggles, and they have achieved and survived with their struggles, and some of their defenses are going to exclude, and some of their defenses, you know, what are the signs and symptoms? Well, if they're not as articulate, or if they're not as, you know, self-aware as I imagine myself to be, then I'm going to say, oh, no, later. But that doesn't mean that that person is that I'm not going to, that's not going to become my best friend, but that may also not be, I'm sure that they have something to teach me.
Yeah. I love this. You brought up so much. And I mean, one of the things I'm kind of taking from what you were saying, or I'm connecting, is just this notion of having like compassion for ourselves and how much we can hold at any one moment, how much we can turn our attention to, and also having some compassion for others and some understanding of others and the challenge that they are also kind of holding. And maybe they have, you know, I think I think of my grandmother. She was an immigrant from Sicily, and wow, she said some really exclusionary stuff. She grew up in New York City in a tough situation, and boy, like I could not believe some of the things my grandmother would say, right? And trying to hold compassion for her perspective and experiences and what had happened, and then also watch in practice how I actually never in practice saw her exclude people, right? Like that all these things can be true, right? We can have like some deeply problematic like ideas, and then also we might act in a very different way, you know, all of this, man, we're just so complex, right? Yeah. We are at time.
Yeah. There in our time. If
It's 10:46. So I'm gonna wrap. I have a handout for you. It's a little booklet. I made this as like a digital thing, and then I found a way to turn it into a zine, which is like I made it myself magazine. So I'm gonna give this out. There was an error on page 7. So I crossed out in quotes, it was supposed to say us, but I put use. So I crossed it out, but when you see that. Okay. Thank you all so much. I hope to see you at the Gandhi Institute sometime. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. How long have you been in this position?
2 years.
2 years now. It's nice to have a chance to get to know you, and
Thank you.
this was a great start for us. Our toes got in the water. We'll keep thinking about being belongers and not excluders, as David put it. So thanks. Yeah, take us, get up to our ankles or maybe our knees. So thank you.